back, everybody, to the Almost Sideways podcast. We are so glad you are joining us. This is episode 118. We are coming to you recording on Sunday, March 21st, 2021 at about 1 p.m. Pacific time. I am your host, Terry Plucknett. Joining me, as always, are Todd Plucknett and Zach Saltz. We are recording during March Madness, so we're going to try and get in and out of here fairly quick so we can get back to watching some basketball. But how broken are your brackets, guys?
Broke. My champ is gone.
Yeah, I had
Thank you,
Michigan
Sister
State.
Jean.
I had Michigan State in the Elite Eight. That was pretty bad.
They
Yeah.
lost the play-in game,
Yeah,
dude. Well,
I had Abilene Christian winning, so I'm proud of that. I had a decent first round, but like I can't get a whole lot of points now.
Yeah, I picked all the wrong upsets, and I'm losing. I've lost half my Final Four. So
I think we just overthought this. Why don't we just go with the Pac-12? I mean, we are a
I know.
Pac-12 podcast.
I actually had the Pac-12 performing pretty well. I just didn't think the Beavers were going to keep it going.
yeah, that's kind of crazy. That's kind
If
of
the
crazy.
Beavers are facing Loyola
State.
in the Sweet 16, that'd be
that'd be crazy.
yeah. I can't. One of those teams making the Elite Eight. That'd be interesting.
I just like how both orange and black OSUs are playing each other in the in the second round. All right, well, Zach, what are you drinking?
I am having a Malibu Splash. I need to take a little light today because I partied hard last night. Terry knows a little bit about what I did last night, and
Yes.
I'll relay it later. But I'm taking it a little light today.
Awesome. Todd, what are you drinking?
Jonas Curse Black Spiced Rum. It's like a really thick rum. It has like hints of vanilla. I didn't have any soda to go with it, so I'm just drinking it straight. So, I mean, because why not?
Why not? Ooh, I forgot. I had a button here I could have clicked. There we go. What are you drinking? Nothing says what are you drinking like Bill Murray in Lost in Translation. All right, so I am drinking. I went to the brewery today, and this is out of Riverbend Brewery in Bend, Oregon. It's a hazy IPA brewed with peaches. I mean, and it's a real nice hazy. Look at that. It's almost like, looks like orange juice almost. But anyways, it's called Life's a Peach, Then You Die. So I like the title. And it's pretty good too. I mean, it's nice light flavor with the little fruity finish to it. It's good. It's good. All right. Well, make sure that you subscribe, rate, review. You can find us all over the place at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify. Make sure you check out YouTube and everything that's going on that channel as well for clips of our show and some full segments as well. Now let's get into what we've been watching. Yeah, I got a button for that now too. Check that out. Okay, so let's start with Todd. Take us into the cager.
All right. So once again, I still have 3 animated movies to knock out in here. So here's another one. It is Teen Titans Go to the Movies from 2018.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. Okay. The Teen Titans are led by Robin, who is getting tired of like every superhero getting their own movie, and because he's just a sidekick, and so he decides he wants to get his own movie, so he has to go find an archenemy while there is like some supervillain plotting to like take over the world or something. And I'm not going to pretend to really fully understand what was going on in the movie. I had hardly even heard of the Teen Titans before this. It's like watching Emperor Zurg versus Buzz Lightyear in like full movie form, and it kind of looks like a bad 90s TV show, which is, I guess it's somewhat endearing at times, because I don't really know who watches this stuff. There are like a few of these movies, and which is kind of crazy because it's kind of chaotic. It's got a really cool supporting cast of characters, character actors: Patton Oswalt, Will Wheaton, Jimmy Kimmel, Michael Bolton, Will Arnett, Halsey, Kristen Bell.
Is that like the Michael Bolton or Office Space Michael Bolton?
Like the Michael Bolton.
Okay.
And of course, it's got Nicolas Cage as Superman, because of course he was eventually going to find a way to play Superman. Because I don't know, the Teen Titans like screw something up at one point, and then the Justice League shows up, and then Cage is there as Superman, and he's just as sarcastic and heroic as you would possibly imagine him to be as Superman, and he should reprise the role. I can't imagine like a weirder movie to watch out of context though, because I can't really tell you what exactly was going on. Like I felt the same way when like Mind came out, like 10 years ago or whatever. But that was even an original story. This is just I'm completely thrown into something weird. It's sort of like the Lego Movie with all the name dropping and like random characters showing up. I don't know. It takes a little bit to adjust to exactly what you're doing, but it actually turns out to be not so bad, I guess. So I'm giving it 2.5 stars, which puts it between Honeymoon in Vegas and Wind Talkers. Number 49 on the Cager. Teen Titans go to the movies.
That's dedication to go that far to finish out Nicolas Cage there.
I know. I think I have what? I have about 12 or so more Cage movies, and one of them is only available in like the UCLA library. So,
is it like a Carmine Coppola, student film, or not?
No, it's like a re-edit of the one Dying of the Light, or whatever that movie Terry had me watch.
Oh yeah,
it's like a re-edit of that Paul Schrader movie called like 211 or something.
That's interesting.
No, it's Dark. 211 is a different one. Either way, yeah. Some of these I don't know how I'm gonna ever watch, but I'm gonna give it a shot.
Nice. All right, well I'll go next for what I watched this week. So my anniversary watch, going back 30 years, 1991. It was nominated for 3 Oscars. And let's see if you guys can get it. The 3 Oscars it was nominated for are art direction, costume design, and supporting actor. Nothing?
1991, you said?
1991.
Is that Barton Fink?
Barton Fink, I got to watch, yeah. So, yes, Barton Fink, 1991, starring John Turturro, John Goodman, and a lot of people. Judy Davis, Michael Lerner, who's the one that got the nomination, John Mahoney, Tony Shalhoub, John Polito, Steve Buscemi. It's a loaded cast of Coen Brothers favorites. And this is really, I was looking at it, this is really the movie that put the Coens on the map in a lot of ways. Like they had a few before this, Miller's Crossing, Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, but they had Barton Fink, and that was their first Oscar nominations that came from one of their movies. And then they had Hudsucker Proxy and then Fargo, and then they just took off from there. So this is what really got them on the map. And it stars John Turturro as Barton Fink, who is a New York playwright who just gets an opportunity to go to LA and become a Hollywood screenwriter. And he ends up in this kind of crummy hotel named the Earl, which I'm pretty sure was inspired by the Cecil, Todd. That's what I'm going with.
Could be.
Yeah, it could be. And his neighbor is John Goodman, this kind of mysterious insurance salesman. Barton Fink deals with writer's block. He goes and talks with other writers like the drunk John Mahoney. He's getting constant pressure from his studio head, played by Michael Lerner, and his producer, played by Tony Shalhoub. And it's kind of fascinating watching what's going on here. And then about halfway through, the movie takes a crazy turn you don't really see coming. And the rest of the movie is just total bananas and awesome. And John Turturro, I mean, this is the type of role that he's perfect at. I mean, he plays a lot of tough guys, but just being this insecure writer is just perfect for him. John Goodman is at his best here, and he shows why he's a great person for the Coens to be casting. And Michael Lerner as the fast-talking studio exec, it's kind of irresistible. I love this movie. I'm giving it 3.5 stars. It's cracking my top 10 of 91. Oh, let me see here. Where did it end up sitting? It's in the second half of 91. Yeah, it's gonna be 8th. My 8th best movie of 1991 now. Yeah, totally worth it. And it was definitely, like I said, it's where the Coens took off, where they had something that could be taken a little more seriously, yet still be quirky and have all their random fun characters and all of that. So yeah, Barton Fink. Todd, I know you're a fan of this. Zach, have you seen that?
It's been a long time, but I like it. It's definitely one of their better ones.
Yeah, it's a good one for sure. For sure. All right. Well, Zach, what did you watch this week?
Well, it's actually not something I watched just this week, but I've been watching it over the last 4 weeks, and that is the 4-part miniseries that just finished airing on HBO, Alan v. Farrow, Alan versus Farrow, directed by Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering. And it basically chronicles the allegations of sexual assault against Woody Allen. The allegation is that he molested his adopted daughter Dylan at their Connecticut home in 1992, and the documentary kind of looks at the case from a completely unabashedly anti-Woody Allen perspective. It doesn't attempt to really give credibility to Woody Allen's side of the case, because frankly there is none. But it also kind of looks at how the media really warped the story against Mia Farrow and against the child in question, Dylan Farrow, and basically protected Woody Allen. It's obviously this is a story that was big when it happened in 1992. Then it just kind of went away. It seems like everybody kind of forgave Woody Allen. He had a big resurrection right in the wake of this scandal with films like Mighty Aphrodite, Everyone Says I Love You, Manhattan Murder Mystery, a few others. And when I was growing up, my dad is the world's biggest Woody Allen fan. And I was introduced to a lot of Woody Allen movies, and there was never any mention of this scandal. And so when it kind of resurfaced in 2014 in the wake of the Me Too movement, when Dylan Farrow kind of made herself a little more well-known on social media platforms, and her brother Ronan Farrow also kind of launched a campaign as well, people started re-examining their movie relationship with Woody Allen, but also in Hollywood their working relationship with Woody Allen. I think this is a riveting documentary. I think Kirby Dick does terrific films. He did The Hunting Ground, The Invisible War. This film is not yet rated. He's a director that is not afraid to have a strong position about a controversy that has happened in society, and particularly in the entertainment realm and in the wake of the Me Too movement. I can't separate the artist from the art, and I can't really watch a Woody Allen movie anymore. And watching this documentary makes me feel as though people who say that it's not as tragic as what Dylan Farrow has had to go through in her life. And Woody Allen really comes off as a total piece of garbage in this documentary. And again, I'm sure it's selectively edited. I know, but I think there's still some ambiguity about it. I was always familiar with the fact that he took this polygraph test that he allegedly was able to pass, but the documentary completely kind of dismantles that. And I think, like Leaving Neverland, the Michael Jackson documentary, it's an important work to be seen by consumers of mass media and culture. And I really applaud Dylan Farrow for being brave and sharing her story. And Mia Farrow, of course, whose career ultimately was pretty much kind of ruined by this scandal and this tragedy as well. So it's a fantastic mini-series. I don't know. I give it 4 stars, I guess. But it's definitely worth checking out. And I applaud HBO for having the bravery to put it out. Now, simultaneously, I see that they still have some Woody Allen films in their catalog, which they should just get rid of. But I think it's really, really profound and meaningful work.
Nice.
It's a tragedy because, we're going to do a power ranking later in this episode. And there were like a couple of Woody Allen movies that I would really think about putting on the power ranking list that we're going to do. And I can't separate it. And this movie or this documentary really just reemphasized the discomfort around him and what a sleazeball he is.
So you don't think you can watch his movies anymore, or you don't want to?
I don't feel comfortable doing it, in part because he plays such a prominent role. And maybe if I were to watch something like Interiors, where he's not an actor in it, maybe I would be able to separate it a little bit more. But like, Annie Hall, Hannah and Her Sisters, those were always my 2 favorite Woody Allen movies. It's so hard and uncomfortable to watch them now.
Well, I'm sure Manhattan plays way differently.
Oh, absolutely. And the documentary really goes into Manhattan specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. I think I'm definitely one that can separate, but I think it definitely gives a different tint to the art When you know some of the backstory of the artist. And I think I want to say TCM right now is doing a series like once a week where they're looking at some movies that can be kind of
with the Wind.
Yeah, they looked at Gone with the Wind and some other ones that how does history, how does time look at what's actually being shown here a little differently. So I think it's a fascinating way to look at it. But my opinion is you don't necessarily get rid of it. You have it as the conversation starter.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I don't think we should remove his movies from the catalog. We should remove like Song of the South from the catalog, okay? But like Woody Allen movies, I think have such a significance in the popular culture. In fact, Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering talk about that. They actually interview people like Alyssa Wilkerson, who I think is the best critic in America right now. And she talks about the significance of Woody Allen on the film industry. You can't just cancel his movies and him too. So it's a really difficult thing to do that you have to kind of make up on your own. But this documentary reinforced the idea that it's really difficult to watch his movies now, and he's not someone who you should be proud to admire. I should tell my dad that.
All right. Very nice. I have not watched any of that. I should go back and check it out. It's
riveting. It's easiest 4 hours you'll ever watch.
And that's coming from Zach, who has trouble watching anything that's longer than an hour 45 right now. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is what we've been watching. Now let's get into our featured reviews. And this segment is going to go a little differently this week because of last week. So last week, we had Todd and Zach were able to make it to the theaters to watch a movie, and I didn't. So I'm going to be reporting on that. And then Zach forgot to watch a movie that we'd agreed to watch that Todd and I talked about. So Zach is going to be reporting on that. Before we all talk about a movie that we watched this week that was nominated for an Oscar that we didn't quite get to. And we didn't even talk about Oscar nominations on this podcast, but maybe we'll get to that a little at another time. And I'm sure it'll come up a little bit when we get to that movie too. So I'm going to go first with this because I got my first trip back to the movie theaters this week since the pandemic hit. The last time before this was last March. I went and did a double feature of The Way Back and Emma. Quite the double feature I had. But I went to the theaters and saw The Father, which is what Todd and Zach talked about last week. I took my headphones out. I wasn't listening to anything that they said, and I still actually haven't listened to that segment. Maybe we'll rehash a little bit of it here. But I did post on social media as I was going in, as I was walking in the theater, the tune that was playing in my head was "Hello, Darkness, My Old Friend." As I walked into the dark room, it's like, oh, this is just so nice. So, yeah, I'll say I was in an empty movie theater. I was the only one in there. I think somebody else stepped in for like 10 minutes and took a seat. So I'm guessing he got out of a different movie and just snuck in for like 10 minutes and realized he didn't want to watch a movie about a man experiencing dementia. So he left. But The Father is a brilliant film. It is absolutely stunning. Anthony Hopkins, Olivia Colman. Anthony Hopkins plays this man who is slowly losing his memory, losing his mind, entering dementia. And Olivia Colman is his daughter who's trying to take care of him. But the creativity they use in playing this out is outstanding. As I was watching it, I'm like, this is like half Away from Her, half Memento. Because you see him starting to lose it, but then at the same time, they're playing it in a way that you're seeing something brand new, and they're putting you into his mind of, okay, wait, who really is the right person? Who is this person here? Is he losing his memory, or is someone just messing with him? Where actually is he? I mean, all these questions pop up, and they do such an amazing job in telling that. Florian Zeller is the director. He wrote the play that this was based off of. It's just such a brilliant way of telling this story in such a unique way. Anthony Hopkins is showing that he still has it just as much as he did 30 years ago when he was in Silence of the Lambs. He is still just as intense and as brilliant of an actor now as he was then. Olivia Colman is quickly becoming one of the best working actresses around right now. If you go back to The Favorite, then she's been in the last couple seasons of The Crown, and now she's in this. Just unbelievable, unbelievable. And then you have supporting parts from people like Rufus Sewell. Um, just a great cast and amazing performances. I'm giving it 4 stars. Now, I know the real controversy with this is it a 2020 movie or is it 2021? I know Todd did a lot of research that technically this is going to be considered a 2020 movie. And so I'm just going to go with that. Going with that, it's my number 4 of 2020 now. So that's where it's landing on my list. But yeah, you guys talked about this last week. I saw you both gave it 4 stars, so you both loved it too. I mean, it's brilliant, right?
Yeah, and it's something I never really seen of, especially a play adaptation like that. I mean, I compared it to Mulholland Drive in a way. It also, like, the way the last scene is set up, and you see things. It's almost like the end of like Inception or something like that. I don't know. It's a really strange way to do that, but it makes the movie so much, just to the point that you actually feel like you are inside that character's head too. Like you are being messed with just the same way he is. And Anthony Hopkins, it's one of the best performances I've ever seen. Like, he should be winning Best Actor. And I also loved Olivia Williams more than Olivia Colman. Even I thought her character was a little bit more complicated. But yeah, we're basically completely in agreement, all 3 of us.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about this movie is that it is nominated for Best Editing, and we're going to be talking about editing later in this podcast. I think it could be a dark horse contender for Best Editing because it's amazingly edited, especially considering just the unreliable narrator of the movie, and the fact that, you know, you're not. We sort of talked about this last week, but it's only meant to give you so much as a viewer to understand. You're meant to feel confused and frustrated, just like the Anthony Hopkins character. I think Olivia Colman is great in the movie too. I think that moment where she's in a car, it's toward the end of the movie, and she's kind of looking out, and maybe it's a Kuleshov effect type thing, but when she's looking out, it's an incredible expression, and I feel like you know exactly what she's thinking and the pain that she's going through. And I think it's one of the best examples of non-verbal acting in a scene that I've seen this year. And we talked about this last week, but Anthony Hopkins, I mean, I was expecting one thing going into this movie. I was not expecting the performance that he gave, which was full of life and vitality and like vigor. It's not exactly what you think of when you think of someone who's in old age, in mental decline. I mean, he brings a lot of life and spontaneity to this performance, which is just really awesome and incredible.
Well, and he does, yet at the same time, you see those looks of confusion. And I mean, we've all known those elderly people that are going through those moments, and I was struck by a couple things. One, how well he's able to portray that and bring that out through those moments of vitality and how real it is. And 2, how sharp he still has to be and I mean, he's got to be in his 80s now, but how sharp he is at his age to be able to portray and emote all of that in a performance like that is incredible. You mentioned the editing nomination. I was really impressed by the production design nomination, and it's very, very subtle, but there's so many things that if you're not paying attention, you'll miss. And I just love the fact that this got 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. When like all season, one of the things that was said about The Father is, are they going to campaign this? Like the campaign was almost non-existent. There were disasters with screeners getting out, and yet still it got 6 Oscar nominations. I mean, this could like be a Best Picture front runner if they had just figured out a way to market this movie and campaign it so people saw it.
It's the same thing that happened with Phantom Thread, and it ended up popping up everywhere right at the end anyway.
Yeah, but Phantom Thread, I mean, that's everyone was waiting for the Paul Thomas Anderson movie. This movie, I think, kind of came out of nowhere a little bit, and I mean, it was at Sundance last year, and coming out of that, everyone was just talking Anthony Hopkins, and now, I mean, picture, actor, supporting actress, screenplay, production design, editing. I mean, it's all over the place. But yeah, just awesome to see this popping up, and it was a great first trip back to the movies for me.
Yeah, same here. It's one of those movies that, like, I mean, it's almost like Sound of Metal in the sense that if an Academy member actually takes the screener and gives it a real shot, you know, they put down their phone, they're not distracted, they really get invested, and they open themselves up to it. It's hard to imagine people not voting for this movie. Like, but, you know, I think that's unfortunately not always the case with Academy voters. But if people really give it a shot and actually watch it and get consumed by it, like we did, it's hard to believe that anyone wouldn't vote for this as at least a top 3 Best Picture winner.
Yeah, of the Best Picture nominees, I've got it 3rd. So, all right. Well, I'm glad we're in agreement on that. Thrice approved. It is only in theaters right now, so if you have theaters open around you, and it's not playing in all the theaters because it is such a small movie, but if you can find it, it's worth going to see as soon as you can. Go check out The Father. All right. Well, that was the new release that we talked about, and then last week Todd and I did a Come to the Stable review of a 1971 movie celebrating its 50th anniversary, Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion. It was nominated for screenplay then, and the year before it won foreign film. Zach, you watched this, I believe, last night. Tell us about the movie, your experience in watching the movie, and everything you thought about it.
All right, so I went into this movie with 3 distinct disadvantages. Number 1 is that I already heard both your and Todd's review of the movie. Number 2 is that I watched this movie with March Madness on. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to watch a movie while also simultaneously paying attention to Abilene Christian in Texas, but that was a feat in itself. So I apologize to the dead filmmakers of this movie. I should have given it more attention. And number 3,
even a foreign film. You read subtitles while watching basketball?
Well, you read my mind, Terry. That's my third point, which is that when I bought this movie on Amazon, it was the dubbed version. Now, I don't know. Did you guys get the subtitled version? Like,
yeah.
Wow. Well, you know,
I borrowed the Criterion from the library.
Yeah, same here.
See, my library didn't have it for some reason. It's one of the Criterions that I don't own. And you know what? That says everything you need to know about the disadvantages of streaming. Okay, screw you, Amazon. The dubbed version was awful, and it's a reminder that I haven't seen a dubbed movie in quite a while. Dubbing really only works when it's like Japanese anime, and even then, it's pretty questionable. I will say that Italian movies in the 60s and 70s oftentimes were dubbed on their native track. So I don't know, maybe if that was, maybe that, you know, it wasn't a sizable disadvantage, but the dubbing in this movie was pretty bad, especially because the main character of the police chief was dubbed by someone who sounded like they were in a John Wayne movie. They literally had like weird American expressions like, "Easy there, cowboy," or "What in the Sam Hill you doing?" Like, really?
Wow.
And then his girlfriend had a very like Sophia Loren Italian accent. So that was just like way off. I liked Todd's review last week where he compared the main actor of this movie to what did you say, Todd? It was
Zac Efron with Liev Schreiber comb over.
I thought he was a little more John Hamm, but I can see where you're coming from. I didn't really like this movie that much. I thought it was pretty dull, pretty boring. I thought the points were pretty obvious. I agree pretty much with both of you with your criticisms of it. Now, the music, we do have to talk about that because I texted Terry in the first 5 minutes of this movie and I said, "You weren't kidding about the Boings. I'm turning this into a drinking game." And let me tell you, that is not a good idea, especially when you're trying to watch basketball at the same time. So needless to say, I did tune out for a good part of this movie. However, and this is you know what you said last week too, Terry. This movie has a really good opening scene. It has a really good closing scene. We don't need the hour and a half or hour 45 minutes in the middle. I think we get the murder, we get the confrontation with the other cops at the end where he signs the confession. I think we get the idea. I read in one of my film review books that it was what did they call it? It was like a I can't remember what the term they used was so perfect, but it was like an endless sermon or something like that. Like the movie feels very proselytizing and sort of obvious in its points, and it's kind of a ripoff of Z in a lot of ways. So I gave it 2 stars while recognizing that I wasn't fully invested in the movie. And we should just put boings, throughout this podcast just to wake us up every once in a while.
Boing.
That's the only thing that got me through this movie is waiting for the next boing. I do like though when he packs up to ostensibly go to jail, he does take some bourbon with him. I like that. That was, I thought, a smooth move.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting watch. I can't even imagine it being dubbed. I mean, the main character talks so fast in that movie that I can't imagine. I can't imagine someone trying to dub him.
Well, it's like the only time I've ever seen Life is Beautiful, it was on Encore and it was dubbed. Ooh. So I've never even seen that in its original form.
I could see that being a distracting one to watch dubbed.
Yeah, I feel like there's that scene in Jackie Brown when Melanie and Lewis are watching that dubbed Rutger Hauer movie on TV. Like that's every dubbed 60s European movie I watch, which is not a lot. I think of that scene from Jackie Brown. So maybe somewhere Melanie and Lewis would watch this movie dubbed.
All right. Well, that's investigation.
It's not a very good movie. Sorry.
Yeah.
A disappointment. And the other 3 foreign films that I had seen from that year, El Topo, The Wild Child, and something. Oh, Les Cirque Rouge, which I actually own on Blu-ray right here. One of my rare Criterion Blu-rays, are much better foreign films if you're looking for a great foreign film from 1970.
I think you should get the Criterion and then watch it again.
I agree. I think I'm being a little disingenuous to the movie.
I mean, just the fact that it has a Criterion means that it deserves another shot from you.
Don't you think it could have just been the first and the last scene, and we get the point?
Well, the middle part is all like this, like avant-garde, like like sexy, like
it wants to be a Godard film.
Yeah, it's yeah. But I mean, I kind of dug it. I wish there was more like procedural stuff, but
it would have been like a great Romanian movie from 10 years ago.
Yeah,
I like it.
The middle needed more for sure. All right. So that's Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, 50-year anniversary. If you're really interested in it, you can find it. You can rent it, apparently streaming dubbed. Did they have the actual version or just the dubbed version?
Just the dubbed version. And wow. I think we do need to give shout out to Ennio Morricone for that score because my goodness, man, that was like intense. That was an experience.
Yes, it was. Okay. Well, now let's get to the one of the few movies. I was texting Todd today. I think what do we say? There were 5 movies that were nominated for an Oscar this year that none of us had seen, and this one doesn't even qualify because Adam had seen this one before. But yeah, 5 movies nominated for Oscar that none of us had seen going into Oscar nominations, and we decided to pick one that the 3 of us hadn't seen and talk about it here. So, Todd, tell us about Best Visual Effects nominee Love and Monsters.
Okay. Love and Monsters is directed by Michael Matthews, and it follows this guy named Joel, who's played by Dylan O'Brien, who lives underground in a shelter, and he's lived there with this colony of people ever since like monsters took over the world. And so he's kind of like easily frightened. He has like no skills. But he wants to get back to his girlfriend who's like 85 miles away. All he ever does is been able to talk to her on the radio. So one day he just says, screw it. And he's going to go do it, even though everyone says you can't do that because you'll, get killed. But he gets joined along his way by this grizzled old man played by Michael Rooker and a young girl played by Ariana Greenblatt, as well as a dog who has more skills than he does and is more adaptable than he is. Dylan O'Brien looks like, he kind of sounds like Sam Rockwell, but he acts like Jay Baruchel, but he's like 10 years too old for this movie. I'm not really familiar with his work. Like, I didn't watch the Maze Runner movies. I haven't seen his Teen Wolf show, but he's just another face to me. And he's a really bland actor, but he does really sound like Sam Rockwell. But if it was like Alex Wolff or someone more polished, it would have made his character more interesting. But I think the movie, it feels sort of like a lost movie from like the mid-2000s. The visual effects seem outdated already, and I'm not really sure how it's Oscar caliber stuff. Like the monsters look cool, but it looks totally corny in that environment, and everything just looks completely fake. Michael Rooker is really good at playing in the apocalypse after The Walking Dead. They just cast him in basically the same part here. Ariana Greenblatt is like the girl in Logan or any other like badass little kid that they put in these kind of movies. But it's yet another like apocalyptic romance. I'm not really sure how this became like a genre but they do it a lot. Warm Bodies or like Zombieland in some ways have the same tone and the same humor and kind of look the same. The giant bugs around every corner to me reminded me of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or something. And
Yes.
but it also has the same kind of like level of intelligence with the script. It's like really well-worn territory. It does really nothing to differentiate it from that. But I kind of had fun watching the movie anyway. They keep making these movies for a reason, and I think it probably would have been like a big like 2-weekend top of the box office kind of thing if it had the opportunity. But instead, it's just like a forgettable like technical Oscar nominee that I don't know if I ever would have watched otherwise. But I still can't say that I wasn't irritated by it. 2.5 stars. You know, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm giving this one 3 stars. I love this, and you mentioned Zombieland. That's kind of what I was thinking when I was watching it. It was kind of a reimagining of Zombieland, and where Zombieland leaned more into the just ridiculous violence and being over the top comical. This leaned into having a huge heart, and that's kind of what I took from it. I hadn't really seen Dylan O'Brien in anything either, but I thought he was great in this part. I enjoyed the journey he was on. Michael Rooker is awesome in that role, and I think every movie instantly gets more fun when Michael Rooker shows up. It's impossible not to really be entertained by a movie like this, and so yeah, 3 stars for me. Zach, how about you?
Yeah, it's a Zombieland ripoff. I mean, that's the 2-word review. This movie wants to be really funny. You can tell, they're very proud of the first 10 minutes of this movie with the writing. They think that they're so hip when, Zombieland was doing this 12 years ago. This movie, I guess, was in development. It's been in development since like 2012, which kind of reinforces Todd's idea that this is a movie that already feels dated. I will say, the setup was kind of interesting. I don't know. For a while, I thought that Dylan O'Brien was the actor from 1917. And what was also kind of interesting is I felt like this movie basically was the same story as 1917 for long stretches of it. But then I realized that he was not the actor, and this movie is not as good as 1917. Although 1917 would have maybe been improved with, giant crabs and jellyfish roaming around.
And this movie should have just been one shot. I get it now.
Yeah. I don't know. This movie, it kind of has ADHD. It's like the writer can't really commit to one idea. So like there are 15-minute segments that seem to go one place, and the screenplay just kind of gives up on it. Yeah, I like the Zombieland parts with the little girl and Michael Rooker. I mean, I love Michael Rooker too. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. If you haven't seen it, check it out. But in the end, I mean, when you introduce your antagonist in the last act of your screenplay, probably a bad idea. And it just generally was pretty lame. Again, hard to watch this movie with March Madness on. And I have not seen any of the other visual effects nominees, improbably. This was the only one I'd seen. So my question for both of you, because I feel like the visual effects in this movie were not very exceptional. Let's take this movie out. What do you put in instead?
The Invisible Man.
I haven't seen Invisible Man.
I have not,
but I've heard that one was good. I know Mank was one that was going for a spot in there. It had very subtle visual effects in like background. I mean, there's a good chance that was probably 6th.
Wait, you saw Tenet, Zach?
No, I haven't seen Tenet yet.
Oh, okay, never mind. It's
one of those I'm just holding off on. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in hearing in audible dialogue for 2.5 hours. The one that I would put in is Palm Springs. Let's make it happen, man. Come on, that had some good visual effects in it.
I'm surprised that like didn't like Wonder Woman not even get like shortlisted.
It's a strange year. There's not like a 1917 big budget action movie that's getting a lot of traction at the Oscars this year. So
I just recently watched Greyhound. I think that would have been a good inclusion, but
yeah, that could have been a good one too. I'm glad to see Midnight Sky pop up in that category though, because that had for all that movie's shortcomings, it had really great visual effects.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking here. There's like no movies that came out. Maybe the one. How about the one with the pill and Dominique Fishback?
Project Power.
Yeah, there we go.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that in there. Throw Project Power into visual
That
effects.
actually had some pretty good visual effects.
It
did. Or the one with Charlize Theron where they never grow old. That one had decent visual effects.
The old guard.
Too. But I don't know. I mean, if you're this one seems so random. How is it any less random than those two movies? So
it was a very
at least
random.
Those two movies were better.
Yeah, I mean, it got this nomination, and it got 3 other nominations. Period. In the award season, it got a Best Science Fiction Fantasy Movie nomination at the Critics' Choice Super Awards.
Ooh.
And Best Costume Design in an International Feature at the CAFCAD Awards. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, those costumes were really intense. I really liked Dylan O'Brien's plaid shirt.
What is the CAFCADs?
Todd,
I'm looking this up.
What would you say is the front runner for best visual effects right now?
I gotta look at the list again.
Love and Monsters, Midnight Sky, Mulan, One and Only Ivan, and Tenet. Probably Tenet.
I don't know. I mean, I would probably say Mulan, but Tenet would be the one that'd be more the traditional choice.
I'm trying to figure this out. It looks like the CAFCADs are like Canadian costume designers. The Canadian Alliance for Film and Television Costume Arts and Design, CAFCAD. There you go. It got a CAFCAD nomination and a
the Canadians really liked it.
And a science fiction and
I guess parts of it do take place in Canada if you think about it. They always talk about going north.
Yeah.
Well, it's listed as the country of origin being Canada/USA, but I know the director is like South African, I think. So I don't really know how that qualifies. I don't know why it's a foreign film then.
I don't know. All right. Well, Zach, how many stars are you giving it?
2.
2. So 2 from Zach, 2.5 from Todd, 3 from me. It's about a $5.99 rental on any streaming platform right now if you want to check it out. All right. Well, that's Love and Monsters. We've got 5 more to go. What were the 5? There were 2 international features. And then Shaun the Sheep, Pinocchio, and My Octopus Teacher were the only 5 that none of us had seen leading into Oscar nominations. And by none of us, I mean Todd.
Who has seen the one and only Ivan?
I've seen that One and Only Ivan.
Oh, okay. How was that?
I think Adam did too. It was pretty good. It's pretty good.
That's another one that when they read it Monday morning, I was like, what is that?
It's pretty good. It totally deserves it too. I mean, Talking Animals, it's good. Bryan Cranston plays a circus ringleader. Yeah, it's about the gorilla in Tacoma, voiced by Sam Rockwell. Yeah, it's worth a watch. It's a good family movie.
Talking Animals, always a good recipe for success.
Talking Animals and Bryan Cranston. I mean,
wasn't Doolittle? Wasn't that an Oscar eligible movie?
Yeah. I mean, they could have gone that way. All right. Well, let's move on from that, and let's get into our power rankings now. And Todd, you won our power rankings game last time. So tell us what our category is.
All right. So I went with an all-time list kind of thing because we talk about that every once in a while and it becomes more like a Mount Rushmore kind of thing or like a weird discussion. So I decided to do a power rankings on it with a slight caveat. So we were doing the all-time best film editing in movies, but it can't be one of the Oscar nominated movies for best film editing. So it narrows it down a little bit. And so the obvious choices like, Pulp Fiction or Raging Bull or whatever are ineligible. And then Terry decided to tack on, why don't we do one per decade? I'm like, okay, we'll make it even harder. But it'll be an interesting conversation because it'll be a really wide range of movies, and I don't know if there'll be any overlap, but should be fun.
Yeah, it kind of made it impossible because basically what I ended up having to do was like make a best of every decade list and pull the top one off and go from there. I have no idea how we're going to predict Adam's list, but
no.
Batman, animated Batman.
There we go.
I'm telling you my strategy right now.
All right. Well, let's see here. Let's start with Zach. Give us number 5 on your best non-nominated editing movies.
Where do I start with this? When Todd first announced this list, I was like, okay, cool, editing, yeah, whatever. But then the more I was like trying to research it and really think about my list, I was like, well, how do you know if something is well edited? I mean, obviously there's like, JFK and, if it like United 93 rapid cuts, like Born Supremacy. Okay, well, that's good editing, right? But like for them, those movies typically have gotten nominations. So like, how do you know if something's well edited? Well, I mean, sometimes there's director's cuts that show that the studio intervened and actually the movie was well edited. And case in point, the Snyder Cut, which I don't think any of us have watched, but I think the consensus on it is that it was actually, Zack Snyder editing it was probably a better idea than the studio taking aim at it, and it made it actually more coherent and watchable. But also at the same time, like editing so much relates to the quality of the screenplay, the directing, the lighting, the cinematography, and of course the acting. So it's highly subjective. And of course, editing has traditionally just omitted a whole bunch of foreign films historically. So I don't know what to do with this list. It's a strange list, but we're going to have some fun with it. So I'm going to start in the 1950s, and I'm going to go straight into a foreign film that is a classic foreign film, gets discussed quite a bit canonically in terms of a movie that demonstrates incredible continuity editing. It's also a movie that is not a quick-paced action movie. Okay, I think that's the easy route to think about good editing, traditionally good editing. And the movie I'm thinking of is Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story from 1953. One of my all-time favorite Japanese movies. It's a classic, and it tells the story of an elderly couple who are basically actually there's a little bit of parallels with the father. They are visiting their children, and as they go from place to place, basically they try to persuade their children to have them move in or be able to accommodate them living with them. And the movie does not have a lot of fast cuts. It doesn't have a lot of action sequences. But it also doesn't feel like an old movie. And I think part of that is because Ozu didn't really like using devices like dissolves or wipes or things that you would have seen in 30s or 40s American movies. Also, he tended to place his camera kind of like what Jonathan Demme did in The Silence of the Lambs. Like what the actors actually kind of like look right into the camera when they're having discussions with one another. There's not really like over the shoulder shots. Again, this is probably more of a reflection of Ozu as a director more so than the editing. But I feel like this is a movie that is slow paced, it's deliberate, and yet it is riveting and never boring. And it feels distinctly modern. It doesn't feel like a movie. It's classically edited, but it doesn't feel like it's stuck in the past. It feels like if you were to watch this movie today, it would still feel very fresh. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the editing. It's timeless and it's beautiful. And a lot of Japanese movies, of course, had a very distinctive style of editing, and it was completely ignored by the Oscars, unfortunately. This is one of the very best examples. And I don't know, it's my pick for the 1950s, which in many ways had a lot of really innovative editing starting to happen around the world, not so much in Hollywood.
All right.
Have either of you seen that?
Yeah.
No, I have not.
Yeah, it's not a traditional choice, or at least not what I would think of. But yeah, I mean, it's a great movie for sure.
Yeah, I do not have the 50s represented on my list.
It's a slow movie, but it doesn't feel slow. It feels compulsively watchable, which I think if you were to ever say that about a movie is a reflection of the editing.
Good call. Okay. I'll go next. My number 5. So I wanted to make sure, as I was going through and thinking about movies that I would consider well edited, I realized I was thinking about some of the same filmmakers over and over again. And whether it's their direction leads well to having a well edited film, or if they just have great editors, or they just know how to work well with their editors, or they just have a distinct style that gets edited well. I don't know, but there were some directors that kept popping up, so I wanted to make sure I didn't overdo any of them. So I didn't pick multiple movies from the same director. But this is one that has it's my 2010 submission is my number 5. It comes from 2018, and I would say it's kind of a shocker that this wasn't nominated for best editing, because my number 5 is First Man. And I think Damien Chazelle is definitely one of those directors who tends to have very well edited movies. I think Whiplash won editing. La La Land was definitely nominated, and then you have First Man. And when you are able to take a movie that where you're, I mean, to be honest, where your main character is pretty bland and boring, and through and that's not a reflection of the performance. It's just Neil Armstrong was a boring guy, and make it riveting and compelling. And then I always find it fascinating how space scenes are edited, and it's always worth watching how that is done. And so yeah, all of that wrapped up, making this movie as great as it was, as compelling as it was. I think it's a testament to Damien Chazelle, his filmmaking, and the editing that was done on First Man. And I still have no idea how this didn't get to be a bigger hit at the Oscars. But yeah, it should have been. So that's my number 5.
You're saying that it was better than Bohemian Rhapsody's editing? That's a bold.
I know.
Bold. I'm being sarcastic, of course. First Man is actually my number 1 honorary mention from the 2010s. That is a great call and a meticulously edited movie.
Well, it's nice that we kind of agree on it.
Is that a shocker, though? We both love that movie. Todd's
we do.
not as big a fan of it.
Oh man, I like the movie. I wouldn't say the editing is necessarily the standout, though. Like for me, editing, it's like, is there scenes that are unnecessary? Is there like lulls in like how much you're interested in what's going on? And I wouldn't say that First Man is perfect in that way, but those are the kind of things that I look at in what I think of with editing. So,
but,
all right, well,
but you know, I was just
go ahead.
First Man covers so much territory about Neil Armstrong's. I like Terry's point. You're not dealing with the most fascinating protagonist, and you're dealing with a lot of information, some of which the audience already knows to a certain extent, others of which is not maybe the most exciting. And to compress it into a timeline that is watchable and exciting in the way it was is really a remarkable feat.
All right, well, Todd, what is your number 5 then?
My number 5 comes from the 2010s. It is editing by Stephen Marioni and Douglas Christ. It is the 2014 Best Picture winner, Birdman, because a lot of things in that movie do not really hold up on rewatch necessarily, but like it is a masterpiece of editing. Like I cannot imagine why the Academy would not go for something like this, or even like 1970 for that matter, because it's like so convincing as being in one take, which it clearly is not. But I mean, it like you never feel like you are leaving these like really sort of unlikable characters like trying to put on a play, and there's never a break in the action. It never lets you really breathe or take any sort of break from what you're watching. And I can't actually picture where they actually put the cuts. Like it is so flawlessly put together, and it's flashy editing, and I don't know how the editors don't respect that to nominate it. So yeah, Birdman, I think it's amazing editing.
Yeah, that definitely made my 2010s list as I was going through and just finding possibilities. It was in the short list that I picked.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection of most people don't understand what editing is. They just assume that it's like really rapid cuts. And obviously a film like Birdman, all the cuts are hidden, and so it's not like they're not there, but you have to be really skilled to be able to identify that. So it's an interesting call. I don't know if I would agree with it, but I like the concept of putting it on your list.
I'll take it.
And I think Todd, you might agree with me here that if we hadn't put our arbitrary rules on this, our 2010 submission probably would have been Uncut Gems. But
yeah,
obviously that was going to be my number 1. But why do any power rankings if we always know what number 1's going to be?
Exactly. That's why Fargo and Uncut Gems are now no longer eligible. Okay, Zach, number 4.
Okay, number 4. Well, I originally wanted a rule where I didn't want to have any 3-hour movies on my list because that should just disqualify any sort of credibility toward the editing. However, I'm going to break my rule because my number 4 film, which is my representative from the 1970s, I think, even though it's a 3-hour movie, like First Man in a way, it compresses a lot of information and, even more specifically, a lot of characters, 24 characters in, to be specific, over a 5-day period. And that is from 1975, Robert Altman's Nashville. And I wanted to put a Robert Altman movie on here because Robert Altman's style, I think, is very much concocted through the editing. It's overlapping dialogue, right? And it's not so much about the shot selection. A lot of his camera work is like kind of moving, kind of slow zoom in, steady cam sort of stuff. But the overlapping dialogue, I think, is really something that is significant in Altman's filmography. I think MASH got a nomination. I'm actually a bigger fan of Nashville. So we see that aesthetic in a lot of stuff today. It's meant to disorient you, but it's also meant to immerse you in the story. And no one was better at it than Robert Altman. And Nashville is his best film. And, again, it goes from character to character. They sometimes have, vague relationships with one another. They interact in surprising ways. It all leads to this kind of culminating scene at the end of the movie that is, again, shocking and still really resonant, 45 years later. It's all through the editing. I mean, a lot of Altman's movies weren't heavily scripted. A lot of them were improvised, or they kind of did like storyboards. They weren't necessarily about the dialogue. You don't think about great dialogue in Altman movies. You think about the concept. I would also put Shortcuts on this list, although, again, I'm not sure if that got a nomination or not. But I think it's really impressive anytime you get those big cast movies with a whole lot of different characters and an editor is able to find the most pertinent points in that movie. Like, in Nashville, it's Lily Tomlin and Keith Carradine and Ronnie Blakely. And there's some great, individual moments in that movie that stand out amid this huge canvas mosaic of characters. So I think the editing in that movie is super impressive. And it's kind of staggering given that that movie was nominated for several awards that year that it didn't get an editing nomination.
Yeah, his movies are sort of, I guess, difficult to single out in editing in that sense. Because, I mean, Gosford Park was a Best Picture nominee as well. No nomination there. And that's even like sort of like a whodunit kind of thing where that would normally be more susceptible to that.
I mean, this is speculative, but I would imagine editing an Altman movie would have been tough. Because maybe like Terrence Malick, I feel like he was a director that just kind of went for it, even if it wasn't in the screenplay. And so you probably had a lot of footage and you just kind of went off his own impulses and to put something coherent together. And sometimes his movies were not coherent. But something as deep as Nashville, I think, is really impressive. Have you seen Nashville, Terry?
I have not seen Nashville.
That'd be a great deep dive sometime.
I have a feeling I may be assigned it soon if I lose trivia today.
Quite possibly. Also, very sadly, a Criterion movie that just went out of print, but very much worth seeing for those of you fans out there.
There you go. All right. Well, number 4 on my list is going in a completely different direction from First Man. This is my 90s submission. And I think one of the things that if you have a well-edited movie, it's shown in how something simple can be made extremely intense simply by the editing. And so my 90s submission is The Blair Witch Project. I think sneakily a very well-edited movie and a very well put-together movie. I mean, this is a movie put together on this tiny, tiny little budget with handheld cameras in the forest. But it is one of the scariest, most intense movie watching experiences you'll ever have. And it works because of the editing that's able to put it all together in this great way. And so the 90s were tough to pick one from. Like you had Tarantino movies that weren't nominated for editing. You had Linkletter movies not nominated for editing. But I couldn't not go with the Blair Witch Project. I had to go with that one. It was the one that had to be the submission from the 90s. So you had this small time movie make it big, and I think the editing was one of the main parts of that. So yeah. What do you guys think of that?
It's I mean, It's an interesting choice. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much there actually was to edit out in that movie. They might have. It might have been all the film that they shot.
Well, yeah, but I'm looking at it not as much as what they took out, as much as it was how they pieced it all together to make it as tight and intense as it was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big defender of that movie. I don't really think about the editing with that movie as much. When I think about that movie, I think just about the handheld and the overall cumulative effect through the acting. But you know, I don't know. I kind of see where you're coming from.
All right, Todd, number 4.
It's not the '90s movie I would have chosen.
I was wondering what was happening, Zach. You completely switched locations.
Yeah,
it sounded like you were like I don't know,
changing it up a little bit.
Somebody.
I mean, we were enjoying having you be able to grab a criterion for, you know, every single movie you mentioned, but
yeah, that's not going to be able to happen. But maybe, you know, it was kind of like an ode to the Blair Witch Project, and like the, you know, like the camera moving around and lots of ambient noise.
You weren't on camera, dude.
Yeah, I know.
Or we could just hear you.
Yeah, we could just hear you. All right, Todd, number 4.
My number 4 is from the 1950s. It is Stanley Kubrick's The Killing, edited by Betty Steinberg, and which is, I think it's arguably Kubrick's best movie. It's one of his first movies, and it really set the stage basically for like Tarantino's whole career. It's kind of the first non-linear storyline to really be more mainstream, and it's one of the most like intense movies I've ever seen. And it actually is really short and compact. And it has all these stories that are interlocking, and nothing ever feels out of place, and that's a testament to the editor. It's about like a heist at a racetrack, and there's all these storylines coming together, and until it like gets this crescendo of a finish. I love The Killing, and I think it's one of the best movies of the 50s, and I think it's one of the 5 best editing jobs of all time, regardless of if it was nominated or not. But I mean, it really was like a movie that set up a lot of other filmmakers for how they make their movies.
Yeah, did Kubrick disown The Killing? I can't remember. He was not a fan of his like 50s movies, was he? I can't remember if that was the one, or was it Killer's? Not Killer's Kiss, or I'm not sure.
Was it Killer's Kiss, Fear and Desire, The Killing? Those are all around that time.
Okay, I've not seen The Killing in a really long time, but now I want to rewatch it. I wanted to go with some Kubrick films on this list, but actually several of them got nominations, kind of interestingly enough. Also, another director who would have been extremely difficult to edit for. I mean, when you're dealing with a pathological perfectionist, maybe he wasn't that way so much in 1956, but didn't like Eyes Wide Shut like take 2 years to edit or something like that? I mean, when you're talking, like, you could interpret this list, this power ranking, to mean like the toughest job that an editor would have had, you know, and editing Kubrick film had to be up there.
Movie where there's like, you know, 100 takes of every scene.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Same with Kubrick.
Zach, number 3.
Okay, my number 3 is a movie that I didn't even think about adding it to my list because I just assumed it was nominated, or maybe even the winner for best editing in 1960. It was not. The winner in 1960 was The Apartment, which is a good movie, but let's get real, okay? You don't think about the editing in The Apartment. It's like just a cool Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine movie. The 1960 movie I'm thinking of is far more influential, far more famous, and a movie that they actually made a documentary about the editing. And that is, of course, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Shoot. We're on the Merlot thing still?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was still a thing. Dang it. I wanted to talk about it.
You will talk about it. Yeah.
Well, I'm sad we had that overlap. Okay.
We have more.
There were other 60s movies I wanted to go with too, but oh well. Okay. Guess it went with the obvious choice.
Yeah. Okay. So
how did that not get nominated?
I have no idea.
Well, we'll talk about that.
All right. Well, my number 3 is another one that might be Merlot, because I have no idea how it didn't get nominated. And that is my submission from the 70s, 1976's Taxi Driver.
Not Merlot.
Honorable mention. Honorable mention.
Okay. Well, there we go. Well, Taxi Driver. Yeah, I don't know how this didn't get nominated for editing. It's one of the few Scorsese movies that hasn't, but it's it's brilliant. It's a brilliant film. We've talked about it before. We've done a deep dive of Taxi Driver, and I don't know what else I can really say about it. It's a brilliant film. It's put together great. It's very well edited, and as many of Scorsese's movies are, I think he's one of those filmmakers that always has well put together films like that. And when I saw that there was one that hadn't been nominated for best editing, I had to include it. So yeah, Taxi Driver. That's my number 3.
Yeah, we talked about this on our deep dive, but I mean, that movie got snubbed like everywhere. Scorsese was not nominated, Schrader was not nominated, editing not nominated, cinematography not nominated. It's ridiculous. And it was the Best Picture nominee.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know if it's the first Scorsese movie I would go with that wasn't nominated. I would actually maybe consider Mean Streets before it, but I certainly understand where you're coming from.
I actually haven't seen Mean Streets.
I think Mean Streets is a little more frantic in its editing, whereas Taxi Driver is, I think, a little bit more conventional. But
all right,
it's not to say that it's a pretty gaping omission that it was made. So,
okay, Todd, number 3.
My number 3 comes from the 2000s. It's kind of obvious why it wasn't nominated. We kind of talked about it on our last podcast about how Oscars that don't really nominate foreign films for other awards when the eligibility window is screwed up. It's 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, which I think is one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had watching a movie. I've only seen it once, but I remember every minute of it. It's almost like in a way that people talk about Requiem for a Dream or something like that. You don't really want to or need to watch it again. That's the way I feel about this, because it's like a fly on the wall kind of situation of this like woman in Romania trying to get an illegal abortion. And it never feels less than authentic, and it is so deeply intense, and you never get a breath during this movie. I looked it up. It didn't even get nominated at the Romanian Oscars for Best Editing, which is just even stupider. I have no idea. It is a super claustrophobic movie, and it was one of the first ones I thought of.
All right, good call.
great call. Great movie. Again,
right.
the Oscars don't nominate foreign films for editing. So, I mean, it's a whole treasure trove of movies. You could make this just all, maybe it's along with the decade kind of gimmick, we should have just done non-American movies.
Or just all American movies, or what?
No American movies. And that way, we wouldn't have all picked the Psycho.
Oh.
Which apparently we've all picked.
Apparently, yeah. All right, Zach, number 2.
All right, number 2 is where I'm going to get in some trouble. All right, so number 2 is a movie that has a grand total of 259 votes on IMDb. It's my submission from the 2010s, and it's a movie I've never seen. So I have a feeling, and Todd's probably not even going to consider it a movie. So I'm just getting ready for the arguments right now, but I need to explain it. And it is called The Clock, and it is made by Christian Marclay. Have either of you heard of this?
No.
Okay, so The Clock is a movie that is 24 hours long, and it is
that you haven't seen.
That I haven't seen, and it is a montage of clips from different movies over the course of movie history, and every clip that's included in the movie has an example of a clock in it. Now, you asked why I changed my setting. Well, I have a clock right over here. So, like, my screen right now could be a part of Christian Marclay's The Clock. This would be at the moment that is 4:13. And so every scene that you see in The Clock, you see a clock somewhere in frame that shows you what time it is. So not only is it like this crazy 24-hour installation piece, but it's actually a working clock. They say that it took 12,000 different clips to assemble, and it took a team of like 20 people over the course of 3 years to edit. They had to use an entire computer lab because the footage would not fit on a single computer. And it is an installation piece, so it is not available on home media. Now, I'm considering this a movie because it has an IMDb page, and it was nominated at, let me see, the Boston Society of Film Critics Awards in 2011 for Best Editing. And it won the Best Editing Award there, and it beat out, I think, something fairly impressive. I can't remember. But I consider this a movie. Oh, it beat out Hugo. I consider it a movie, and I've never seen it. I want to see it someday. But think about that. 24 hours of clocks in movies. I mean, that's crazy, right? That has to be the greatest editing of all time.
Now that you mention it, I think I have heard of this before.
I mean, you have to find a movie that has 6:13 or 12:22 or 8:11. How do you find that? That's unbelievable. Obviously, this movie also ran into some copyright problems. So that's another reason why it doesn't really have a lot of distribution channels. But it's an awesome idea. I'm sure it's great.
Yeah. All right.
Does that upset you, Todd? Are we? Is my list disqualified?
I mean, it's a movie. I mean, the fact that you haven't seen it is
also a working clock.
You've done that before.
That's true.
All right.
This is not a video game.
Yeah, if we get a best editing video game from Adam, I'm gonna be mad.
Yeah.
Okay. My number 2 is my submission from the 2000s, which I realized was the hardest call to make. Was what movie to pick from the 2000s, because there are so many greatly edited movies that were not nominated in the 2000s. But the one I had to go with was the one that probably the editing is the most noticeable and used to the greatest effect. It's a movie Todd mentioned just a little bit ago, and that's Requiem for a Dream. I wanted to go with some other things and add it in there, but when it came down to it, if we're talking editing, nothing really beats Requiem for a Dream. Like I said, the editing in there, it's like the most noticeable, but every time and it's really when they shoot up, and that's when you notice it, and the way it uses it in that way, and then also with the TV with Ellen Burstyn's character, the editing becomes almost like a character in the movie, and it is a fascinating use of editing, and had to be on this list. So my number 2 is Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah, that's an honorable mention. That's one of the great editings of all time for sure.
Yeah,
of course. My number 1 honorable mention from the 2000s as well.
All right, Todd, number 2.
So my number 2 could be somewhat a controversial choice because the editing was controversial, and it is editing by Alan Hyman, Gerald Greenberg, later by Tony Kaye, and later again by Edward Norton, and that is American History X. Because obviously, when you have that many people working on this, it's going to be a tortured process, and somehow the movie still is like masterfully put together. And the first cut of the movie evidently was like 20 minutes shorter. That's what Tony Kaye had pulled out of what was originally edited, and then the studio got Norton involved, and he made the eventual cut that we see now that's more closer to 2 hours. And Kaye eventually disowned the movie, but he's a madman. I have no idea why he doesn't like this movie. He's nuts. Like the flashback scenes, like the black and white, the slow motion, and nothing ever seems out of place, and everything is working toward one goal, and it's just like a blistering like 2-hour movie, and it's one of the most iconic movies of the last 25 years, and it's how it's put together that makes it so different, and I think that is, I mean, it probably has a lot to do with Tony Kaye's vision, but eventually the cut that we saw, because it uses the length to actually enhance the movie and not necessarily just make it some sort of like I don't know, I don't know what the word is, but something that is only shorter just to make it have some sort of a lasting effect or whatever. But yeah, American History X, I love the editing, and I know that is not an easy choice to make, but yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Not bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's one that's definitely, I would put it in the like sort of flashy category. You recognize the acting, or editing. That's one of the tough things about this list, is that some of the best edited movies have continuity editing, which is invisible editing. If you notice the editing, that's a problem. It's like a pilot flying a plane. If you're noticing what the pilot's doing, that's probably a problem. But in the case of American History X, which draws a lot of attention to itself, to kind of get your mindset in the characters' minds, it works pretty effectively. Not one that I would choose, but I know Todd's a huge fan of that movie, so I get it.
All right, Zach, number 1.
Okay, so my number 1 is my selection from the 2000s. And it's, when I think about great editing experiences, I want to be visually assaulted at the movies. Requiem for a Dream certainly did that, right? And again, this is not if it's going to be something that's using continuity editing. This is a movie that very much does not use continuity editing. It's also a documentary, which I'm almost a little surprised that no one has mentioned yet. It is probably my favorite documentary of all time, and that is Dear Zachary, a letter to a son about his father. The director, producer, narrator, and editor of the movie is Kurt Hewin. And I don't know how this guy assembled what he assembled, but he took what had to be hours upon hours of home movies of his protagonist in this story, Andrew Bagby, who at the time he had made the movie had been murdered. And so he's looking at all this archival footage, but then he actually does interviews with people throughout Andrew's life. It's also a movie that uses like some stop motion animation and motion graphics in really unique, interesting ways. This is a movie that wears its heart on its sleeve. It's the total opposite of something like Tokyo Story. It is blatant. It is in your face. The editing is frenetic and noticeable and passionate. Walter Murch has this idea about editing that there are 6 principles of editing, and the most important thing that you can do as an editor when deciding to make the cut from one shot to another is the emotion of it. And Dear Zachary is maybe the most emotional experience I've ever had watching movies, certainly a documentary. And it's because of just how many shots there are and just the crazy editing that this guy does throughout the movie. It is so impactful, so emotional, and it's all because of the editing. And you can think of some other documentaries that do it too, but what this guy had to go through to assemble the footage and put it in a way that was coherent, but also artistic and intuitive and moving is just amazing. So it was kind of like always going to be my number 1 pick.
Yeah, editing in documentaries is almost a different category, but that was one that I was actually thinking about mentioning as well. And I mean, I know like Hoop Dreams is nominated for Best Editing, and I know that like OJ Made in America at some critic places was winning Best Editing and stuff. I don't even know if it was eligible at the Oscars, but like those things are sometimes even more impressive than what you see in narrative movies.
I almost went with the documentary as my 2000 submission, but it wasn't Dear Zachary. It was Man on Wire, which is another great use of editing.
Very different use of editing.
Very, very, very different. Yeah.
Also using archival footage from a long time ago in a way that is really upfront and captivating.
Yeah, and what I like about that one is how it mixes the archival footage with the interview footage and makes it almost suspenseful and intense and playful in that way. But Dear Zachary is absolutely something like that. It has to be mentioned when you're talking about editing. So, all right. Well, I think it's now time for the 3 of us to talk about Psycho, because it's number 1 on my list. Todd hasn't mentioned it yet, so it's number 1 on his list, and Zach still wants to talk about it. So let's talk about Psycho. The one thing that I will say is, again, Zach mentioned how was it not nominated for editing. You have possibly the most iconically edited scene in all of film in Psycho, and it wasn't nominated. Like the shower scene in Psycho is like one of the most iconic uses of editing ever, and it wasn't nominated. I mean, that's just the one tiny example of what makes this film such a greatly edited movie. But that's the main point I wanted to make with that. Todd, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, they pretty much off the main character in like 30 minutes. And then after that, like it becomes something different, and you never feel out of place, and everything you are constantly surprised by what's coming next. A lot of it is obviously credited to Hitchcock, but but at the same time, it's about the rhythm of the movie, and there's really no movie that has the rhythm of Psycho. And that's just how everything plays off the previous scene. And I don't know how else I'm supposed to talk about this.
Zach, how about you?
Yeah, and the documentary that was made about it is called 7852, which refers to the number of cuts and the number of camera setups in the shower sequence. One of the reasons that it's so famous is because in 1960 you couldn't show a naked woman and you couldn't show blood, And Hitchcock got away with both through the use of really strategic editing. But I would also, look at the first 30 minutes of the movie before the shower sequence, which is actually really kind of slow building. Like, when the Janet Leigh character like steals the money, like those shots are not meant. They're not flashy in the way that the shower scene is flashy, but it builds up suspense, and this character's on the run. And then she has the first encounter with Anthony Perkins, which it's a tete-a-tete that is, again, very much like hinges on something underneath the surface that's really unpleasant, and it's just about the editing, right? And you have to put a Hitchcock movie on this list somewhere, so why not choose the one that's probably the most famous of his and probably the most egregious oversight in this category of all time?
And it wasn't nominated for Best Picture somehow.
Just crazy. Well, the Oscars kind of notoriously overlooked Hitchcock a lot of times. Like after they gave him a Best Picture win for Rebecca, wasn't it? And they basically overlooked him. Yeah,
he was nominated for director here. I mean, obviously they thought this was more of an achievement of him and not necessarily an achievement of the movie or other people involved.
His films were missing in a lot of places, though, for the rest of his career after that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because the 60s was like the easiest decade for me to think of movies on this list. Like I almost want to, rescind Psycho and put, this will lead into honorable mentions, but like Bonnie and Clyde wasn't nominated. And like,
that's honorable mentions
that's
too.
insane. I mean, that is also a historically significant editing, and maybe a similar way to Psycho, because the penultimate scene in that movie is so influential in its mixture of quick cutting and action and violence. So that's astonishing that wasn't there, along with Breathless. I mean, Breathless ushered in the new wave. It was the first movie that did that sort of, again, overlapping dialogue, non-linear sort of, non-continuity stuff. So a lot of influential stuff in that decade that the Oscars failed to recognize.
All right, well, let's talk honorable mentions. Zach, you're first. What else do you have on your list?
Oh, well, besides that, I didn't choose any movie from the 90s, but I had some that I wanted to mention. Natural Born Killers, The Truman Show, Boogie Nights, Hoop Dreams got the nomination, so I can't put that. I also thought about, let me see here, Old Boy from the 2000s and The Brown Bunny. Now, The Brown Bunny is not a great movie, but it's a movie that inspired Roger Ebert to go from giving it 0 stars with its initial cut to 3 stars after Vincent Gallo cut 26 minutes out. So that's got to be pretty impressive editing, right?
So his star rating, his editing of his star rating is that okay?
The editing single-handedly moved it from being one of the worst movies that Ebert had ever seen to being a 3-star movie.
I like it.
That's impressive.
So your honorable mention is Roger Ebert's edit of his review.
No, it was Vincent Gallo. Vincent Gallo took out 26 minutes, but yes, it was Ebert's reaction.
Makes it the anti-director's cut, and it made it better.
It's the critics' cut. The critics' cut. All right. Well, I had a whole bunch of movies that I had written down, but some filmmakers that I wanted to mention that I didn't mention before that I think had are known for having well-edited movies that I didn't have in here. Someone like Tarantino, or who else was I looking at here? Linklater I mentioned at one point. I think someone in the last decade that has been that has become known for well-edited movies is Rian Johnson, and so that's another one that you could mention. So 2010s, just a couple movies here that I thought about putting in. So I had like Looper and Knives Out, Nocturnal Animals I thought about putting in from the 2010s. The other ones from the 2000s I was thinking about, I mentioned Man on Wire. The Lives of Others I think is a very well edited movie. Kill Bill, I couldn't decide which one, so I just went with all of it. And Mulholland Drive I mentioned as well. The 90s I also had Truman Show. I had Reservoir Dogs, Dazed and Confused. Films like that. The 80s, I didn't have any submission from the 80s, but if I did, it would have been Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I think that Tim Burton does some fun stuff with editing as well as Do the Right Thing. That was another one I thought about. The 70s, Godfather Part 2 wasn't nominated for Best Editing. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I came across that too.
Yeah. And I also had the China Syndrome. I thought that that's a really fascinating movie. The 60s, I had a few other movies like 2001, talking about Kubrick. I had that on there. The Graduate wasn't nominated for Best Editing. Or Wait Until Dark, I had on the list as well. That it's a really cool movie that was nominated. Let's see here. Not really anything interesting in the 50s. 40s, I thought about Treasure of Sierra Madre. 30s, I thought about Wizard of Oz. But that's about it. Todd, what'd you have?
So in the 2000s, I had written down Old Boy, Mulholland Drive, and Requiem for a Dream that you guys already mentioned. The 90s, I had written down flashy editing stuff like Run Lola Run and Fight Club from which is just a crazy editing, and of course The Usual Suspects. In the 80s, I wrote down Do the Right Thing. In the 70s, Taxi Driver and The Godfather Part 2. In the 60s, Bonnie and Clyde. Sullivan's Travels from the 40s, and also Detour, which is like a 70-minute film noir that I would put on my list, but I know you guys haven't seen it, so
I've
you
seen
guys
it.
don't like when I do that. Really?
Yeah. Film noir.
Okay.
Classic, yeah.
Well, that would have been, yeah, that's in my all-time top 5 editing, regardless. So I would have put that on if I would have known that you'd seen it.
All right. Well, it is now time to try and pick Adam's list. The impossible task. So, Zach, what do you got?
Okay, I went number 5, The Wizard of Oz. Number 4, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Number 3, Toy Story. Number 2, Empire Strikes Back. And number 1, Psycho.
All right. I went number 5, Justice League, the Zack Snyder cut, as the 2020s submission. Number 4, Sideways.
You only gave it 3 stars, though. Well, he didn't go crazy over it.
But he moved his other movie down.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Number 4, Sideways. Number 3, Knives Out. Number 2, The Professional. Number 1, The Empire Strikes Back. Professional, another really good one, by the way.
Which one?
The Professional.
Oh, yeah. I actually have that listed here, too. Number 5, I have The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Number 4, The Professional. Number 3, Up in the Air. Number 2, Back to the Future. And number 1, Drive.
Okay.
I wanted to put the 10 Commandments on, but that actually won Best Editing. So.
All right. So here we are. Here is his list. His honorable mentions. He has 3 honorable mentions: Reservoir Dogs, 3 Kings, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. All right. Number 5 from the 2010s, Ex Machina. Number 4 from the 2000s, Requiem for a Dream. Number 3 from the 80s, The Shining.
Of course.
Number 2, yeah. Number 2 from the 90s, Heat. And number 1 from the 60s, Psycho.
So Zach wins. Not
Come
even
on,
a little
man.
bit.
Snyder Cut. That didn't even make an honorable mention. Come on, man.
That is Zach's 20th win. Terry has 16, and I have 26 and a half.
How often has there ever been a power ranking where all 4 of us had number 1 the same? I guess I didn't have Psycho number 1, but I could have. I mean,
yeah, you basically said like, yeah, they made a documentary about the editing. Yeah, yeah, I don't think we've ever agreed completely with the 3 of us.
No, I don't think so. But yeah, that would have been crazy if we all had Psycho number 1.
Yeah. So haven't we all given Deer Hunter number 1 of 78? So it'd be like the Deer Hunter of power rankings, right?
Something like that. Isn't Fargo a consensus? I feel like we've talked about this before.
Okay.
Anyways.
Uncut Gems, I don't know how that's not the consensus, but
that's Terry's fault.
It's my fault. It really is.
Parasite's pretty good though.
Yeah. Well, it's not just my fault. Adam has Parasite 1, Uncut Gems 2. I have Parasite 1, Uncut Gems 4. It might need to be higher. I don't know. Anyways, trivia time. All right. Zach is hosting trivia, which means he assigned Todd and I stuff to watch. Todd, you're first. What'd you watch?
I watched the 1992 Carl Franklin movie One False Move, which is a movie that starts with this like violent scene in LA where 3 criminals are ripping off a drug dealer and they kill everyone there. And then they go across country to Arkansas to a safe house for where one of their families lives. The criminals are Cinda Williams, Billy Bob Thornton, who also wrote the script, and Michael Beach. And Bill Paxton plays this like small town police chief in Arkansas who gets word that they're coming to Arkansas. So the LA cops go there and work with him to try to take down the criminals. But he actually has like a connection to one of them from the past, and so things sort of get complicated. It feels like a procedural cop TV show in the first half. Like Franklin is a TV director mostly by trade, and so that isn't, but it's not necessarily a bad thing when it's done right. It's like the cops think that they're chasing a serial killer. It's definitely a post Silence of the Lambs style detective movie. It almost like appears they use some of the same sets even. But Paxton is so bad in this, like just like he is basically in everything else. Like his best and only good performance is in Big Love, but in this he's playing this like dumb, racist, like bumbling idiot of a cop, but he's in a leadership role, and I don't know. It's like he's taking the crown away from David Duchovny and David Arquette of like the actors that I can't figure out why they ever got famous. But yeah, he's terrible in this. Having said that, the movie is pretty good around him. I think the other actors are really good, especially Billy Bob and Cinda Williams. There's some Fargo in how it's like shot, especially. The small town stuff feels pretty authentic. When they're like going to Arkansas, it kind of reminded me of like From Dusk Till Dawn, but like like pre-vampires, but with the cops chasing them. The dynamics in the group are pretty interesting, and does have some surprises. It turns into like almost a noir in the end with like this like blaring 1940s style music in the final shootout. It's a Todd movie for sure, but I bet Zach would actually say it doesn't age well if he watches it again, because like he kind of does that with all the movies we revisit, but like this one especially, there's like some things that similar to like Three Billboards or something that Zach wouldn't necessarily like. But it's Ebert's number 2 of 91 or 92, and also Siskel's number 1, so we know why he actually loves the movie originally. I'm giving it 3 stars. It's totally a good movie.
Totally a good movie.
It's totally a good movie.
Yeah, Todd's calling me out in accurate ways. I have not seen it in a while, but I do remember really liking it. And I totally disagree with you about Bill Paxton. I mean, come on, man. You didn't think he was good in Aliens? You didn't think he was good in Apollo 13? Or
no, he was my worst performance in Apollo 13, if you remember, and in Twister.
And he's I think One False Move, he's amazing at. Well, what about Frailty? I mean, my God, he's amazing in Frailty. Or did he just direct that? Actually, I'm now kind of spacing out. But
exactly.
He's really good at playing people who you assume are doofuses and actually have a lot more complexity to their characters. So I can't think of many other actors in 1992 I would have cast in that role. But I remember really liking the movie, and I can definitely see some parallels to Fargo. Silence of the Lambs, not so much. So I would actually want to go back and look at that. But I'm glad you like it. I think it's a Todd movie. I think Billy Bob is really good in it, and it definitely is surprising. Goes in some unexpected directions.
Yeah, totally a good movie.
Totally good.
I'm glad.
All right. Well, now it's my turn. And speaking of, as we just did, of unanimous choices in a year, this film is notorious for keeping us from being unanimous in a year. Actually, Zach, you've never actually sent me an updated top 10 of 2014, so technically it's still unanimous. But what I had to watch was from 2014, the Dardenne brothers film 2 Days, One Night, which Zach has as his number 1 of 2014. It was his number 2 of the decade, and everybody else has Boyhood number 1. Anyways, so I finally had to watch it. This stars Marion Cotillard as Sandra, who is someone that is coming off of some sort of medical leave in her job at a factory. And a vote goes through at the factory amongst the workers. They ask the workers, would you rather have Sandra here or get a $1,000 bonus? And they all vote to have the bonus. Well, it turns out that their boss had kind of been manipulating the group a little bit, and intimidating them to try and make sure Sandra got fired, has something against her for some reason. And so the owner of the company agrees that Sandra can have a new vote on after the weekend to see if she can keep her job. And so she has to go around through 2 days and 1 night and try and convince all of her coworkers to give up $1,000 so that she can keep her job. It is a really interesting story and a really interesting premise, and Marion Cotillard is incredible in this, as you can tell she's fighting through some definite personal demons and problems that are going on in her life that doesn't really address directly, but it definitely references over and over and over again. And the different confrontations she has with the different characters are very compelling as well. Some more than others. It's a 3-star movie. I went into this movie thinking, okay, let's see what's so special about it. And I came out of it thinking I didn't necessarily see what's special about it. I mean, it's a compelling story that's well told. Marion Cotillard gives a great performance, but other than that, I mean, I didn't really see anything great in it. It feels like half the time she's sitting in a car whining about why she has to do this and doesn't want to do it anymore. I feel like it repeated about 3 or 4 different scenes in the car with the exact same dialogue between her and her husband. And the ending isn't necessarily where you think it's going, which is, I would say, is a good thing. But yeah, it's 3 stars. It's good. It's not the masterpiece, but it's a good movie. So that's my thought.
I kind of predicted something like that. I don't think the Dardennes are exactly Terry's cup
You know, I think this is the second Dardenne Brothers movie I've seen, and the other one I watched was The Child, and I kind of felt the same way. It's like, okay, I don't really see what the big deal is.
I feel like Terry would love Lorne in Silence.
Yes. Well, Lorne in Silence, no offense, Terry, it's probably the most like narratively conventional of their movies, but okay. Whatever. It's better than Boyhood. You know, it's a movie that I saw at like the right moment of my life and the right experience watching it. But I think why I suggested it for you was less about the Dardenne brothers, more about that it's basically like a French version of 12 Angry Men, which I know you're a big fan of. They were definitely like you had to see some parallels there, right? The idea that she has to convince other people and basically articulate why they should change their mentality about something, and she does it in, I think, really interesting and complex ways. And did you at least like the soccer guy? I mean, he was one of my greatest 5-minute performances. He's amazing in that movie, right?
He is. He is good. He is good. I was looking for him after you mentioned him in your best 5-minute performances. So yeah, that was good. I will say though, one of the things that was like, okay, how the hell does this happen? How does she go from needing to go to the hospital and getting her stomach pumped to like 10 minutes later getting out and going around and talking to people again? I mean, it felt like that should have been at least an overnighter in the hospital. And yet within like 10 minutes, she's back out on the road going to find people.
Because the title 3 Days, 2 Nights isn't as sexy. That's why.
So she's this frail, insecure person, but gets superhuman strength. I mean, I almost felt like at that moment, it's like, what? I mean, she's up against the clock. What are we, cranked now or something? It was bizarre. But yeah, no, it's good. It's good. So yeah, 3 stars.
Yeah, I mean, I know Todd recently talked about the most emotional experience that he ever had watching a movie. I think being in a theater, seeing that movie was the most emotional experience I've ever had in a movie. But I understand that other people wouldn't have the same reaction. It's one of those movies that I wouldn't call it a personal pleasure or a guilty pleasure, but it's like a movie that I understand if other people don't love it as much as I do. Which is why it was my number 2 of the decade, even though I maybe had a greater emotional response to it than my number 1 of the decade.
And I will say for this, I also was able to borrow the Criterion Blu-ray from the library to watch it.
Yeah, they've put out a lot of the recent Dardenne Brothers movies, and they've never made a bad movie. Check out their work.
Yet they couldn't be on your Mount Rushmore of
because it was just a little too predictable, right? You got to change things up a little bit every once in a while.
All right, well, it's trivia time. Zach, what are we doing?
Well, I thought about just going through, name the best visual effects winners from the last 20 years, but that was going to be really obvious, right? So we're not going to do that. We're going to do something more fun and a little bit more, shall we say, maybe controversial or unplanned or improvised. So here's what we're going to do. We reviewed a movie today called Love and Monsters, and we were all kind of in the middle about it. What we're going to do is we're going to do a few categories, and the first category is I want you to think of all the movies that you can think of that have the word love in them. Now, it cannot be lovers. It cannot be loving. I will maybe accept loves, plural. But you have to think of movies that have the word love in them. Now, this could go on forever. So I'm going to try my best to keep a clock running of, I don't know, say 15 seconds per answer, or else we're going to be here forever. So I'm going to try to keep that in mind. And I will be checking to see if these are actual movies. But, if hopefully you won't need to be inventive enough to come up with your own titles. So we're going to start with Todd. Give me your first pick, Todd.
Love Actually.
That is a movie, from what I've heard. Correct.
Crazy Stupid Love.
Correct.
I Love You, Man.
Oh, good call.
Correct. I didn't even have that one written down. Good. Yeah.
I Am Love.
Correct.
I don't know why that one popped in my head, but it did.
Love Story.
Correct.
Love in the Time of Cholera.
Wow. Okay,
Nice.
you guys are picking ones I didn't even think of. Okay, good.
I had
good
that
one.
one written down too. I think you're going there.
All right, Todd, your pick.
It's like All the Boys Say I Love You or something.
All the Boys Say I Love You.
It's like a series of movies, right? I think Adam's seen them.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at.
First of all, that's not the right title, and the title is To All the Boys I've Loved Before, so that sort of disqualifies it. So Terry, it is your pick.
P.S.
You
I
can run
Love
up the
You.
score here. That is a movie, correct?
Shakespeare in Love.
Correct. Five, 4, 3, 2.
Love is a Many Splendored Thing. Did Elvis make a Love is a Many Splendored Thing movie?
I actually think that is the title of a movie.
Unbelievable.
I think it won like best song. Yeah, it is. It is a movie. So
yes,
that counts. Do you have any more?
I'm gonna tap out with that and
all right. So
declare victory on that category.
With a score of 6-3, Terry got to run up the score a little bit. We're going to move into our second category here, which is very similar to our first category because we did watch a movie called Love and Monsters. And so now I want you to name as many movies as you can with the word monster or monsters in them. I think this might be a little bit more challenging, but we shall see. The same rules apply. I'll count 15 seconds, and I'll try my best to look up titles that maybe are questionable, like Todd's pick, whatever that was. And we'll start this time with Terry.
Monster.
Correct.
Monsters Ball.
Correct.
Monsters versus Aliens.
Correct.
Monsters and Men.
Monsters and Men.
Pretty sure that's what it's called.
Correct.
A John David Washington movie.
Yeah, you're right. Correct.
Gods and Monsters.
Correct.
Monster in Law.
Correct. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Anything, Terry? Okay. Todd, it's your opportunity to run up the score. Catch up.
Monsters Inc. Monsters University.
Correct.
A Monster Calls.
Correct.
Oh, wow. Good call.
Five, four,
I
three,
got nothing.
2. Okay. Well, Todd did impressive that round. Now the score is 10-9 with Todd leading. A couple that you forgot were Party Monster, the Macaulay Culkin movie.
Oh yeah.
Metallica, Some Kind of Monster, the documentary.
Nice.
Monsters v Aliens. And did anyone say Money Monster?
Is that what Terry said?
I said Monsters versus Aliens.
Okay, good. I wrote down your point. I didn't mark it on my computer. Okay. So our last category, score 10-9. It's anyone's game. So keeping in the same sort of theme, we watched a movie called Love and Monsters. What I'd like you to do is think of all the movie titles you can with 3 words in them, and the second word is and. So Love and Monsters would be one of them, and blank would be however many more you can think of. This could also go on until the end of time, so I will try to keep more closely associated with the clock, maybe Christian Marclay's clock, and we'll see how this turns out. So we started with Terry the last round. We'll go to Todd this round.
Harold and Maude.
Harold and Maude is correct.
Fanny and Alexander.
Correct.
This should be way easier. It's one that I thought of after Love and Basketball.
Correct.
Oh. This is one I thought of earlier. Cowboys and Aliens.
Correct.
It's like, nope, not Monsters, but close.
Black and White.
Correct. Wait a second. Black and white?
Isn't that? Or is it black or white?
It's technically black or white.
Oh.
I don't know. Should I give him a mulligan for that, Terry?
I don't know. It's your call.
I'll give you a mulligan for that because I thought it was black and white as well. So I'll give you a mulligan on that.
Like that one. I forget who was in that movie.
Kevin Costner.
Yeah, Kevin Costner movie. Okay, that's right.
Dazed and Confused.
Correct. Todd's struggling. He's going to need the help. I think he's overthinking
Cops
it.
and Robertson. Isn't that a movie?
Cops and Robertsons. Yeah, I'll count it. Okay. Classic 90s.
Wow. It can only be the 3 words, right?
Yep. Something and something.
Um.
You got anything? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Nope.
I think that's
Malcolm
it.
Malcolm and Marie.
Malcolm Marie. Okay, I'll call it. I gave Todd sort of a mulligan there, so I'll give you one too. All right,
Bonnie
Todd.
and Clyde.
Correct.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we kind of talked about that one already.
You got anything, Terry?
You know, it's a great question. I feel like I should. Like Todd said, should not be as hard as Marley and Me.
Correct.
Fast and Furious, the 4th one.
Correct.
Oh gosh. It had to be the 4th one though. 5, 4, 3, 2. Yeah, I'll call it. I'm done.
Bowing out. Okay, Todd.
Jack and Jill.
Jack and Jill is correct.
I got nothing.
Yeah, Todd wins by a score of 17-15, but not bad. A few others that I wrote down were Cats and Dogs, Stanley and Iris, Sweet and Lowdown, Sound and Fury, Roger and Me, 12 and Holding, Tom and Jerry, Angels and Demons, and who could of course forget the movie that launched the career of Jack, Spray and Wash.
I could have said
accepted that.
I would have accepted it.
I could have said Gods and Monsters again. I just realized.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Worked for both categories.
That was brutal.
I thought about saying like Harry and the Hendersons, but that had a "the" in there.
Yep. Cops and Robertsons. Haven't thought about that in a while. I've seen the poster of it. Isn't it with Jack Palance and Chevy Chase?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Directed by Michael Ritchie.
I think we need to do this as a Come to the Stable from the 90s.
It's playing on Crackle, it looks like.
I'm seeing if any movies on my walls work, and none of them do.
Benny and June, Romeo and Juliet, Jules and Jim.
Romeo and Juliet.
Tango and Cash. Q&A.
How many
Dumb and Dumber
of that would have counted? Tom and Tom, is that what you said?
Dumb and Dumber.
Or Dumb and Dumber, oh yeah. Yeah.
Tom and Jerry like just came out. Good grief.
Pain and Gain, Pain and Glory.
We suck, Todd. We suck.
Well, I know. Well, I mean, I had one that would have gone in a previous category, but instead I tried to pull out that stupid title of that Netflix movie that I hadn't watched. To All the Boys I've Loved Before, is that what you said?
Yes. I've actually seen that too, sadly.
I think that, honestly, I think the sequel does just have the word love in it, but the sequel's like To All the Boys I Still Love You or something like that.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's
that was fun.
That
Parents,
was
I Love You. That would have worked too. All of those ones. New York, I Love You.
I don't know. Would he have taken Prishatem? I don't know if he would have.
Yeah,
I said
I would have said that. I was wondering if someone was going to say Amour. I don't know if I would have accepted that.
Oh.
No one ever calls that love.
Isn't that one like NC-17 movie called Love?
Oh yeah, the Gaspar Noé. Yeah, I would have accepted that.
I like how the second movie out of my mouth was I Am Love, the Tilda Swinton movie.
Yeah, that was weird.
Have you even seen that?
I have seen it. I went to Fox Tower to see that back in the day. Okay. Well, it's time to wrap this up. I'm going to have to watch another movie. Todd gets host trivia. Yay. Okay. Quote of the day time. Todd, you get to start.
So I wrote a quote down from Love and Monsters. And he says, "I've been sensible all my life. It's gotten me nowhere." And I feel like that describes this podcast.
Well played. Well played. I'll go next. I have a quote from Barton Fink. And I won't give away too much, but at one point, Barton Fink is being interviewed by some detectives about a crime that had been committed. And they're asking him what he knows about a potential suspect. And he says, well, he said he liked Jack Oakey pictures. And the detective says, ordinarily we say anything you might remember could be helpful. But I'll be frank with you. Think that is not helpful. And the next line, the other detective saying like, notice he's not writing that down.
That actually sounds like a Coen Brothers line, but it sounds like it should be said by John Goodman.
It was not said by John Goodman. It was said by some like raspy voiced detective. All right, Zach, what do you got?
All right, my quote comes from Roger Ebert's review of The Brown Bunny. He actually has a couple quotes that I'd like to say. The first quote is, "It is said that editing is the soul of cinema. In the case of The Brown Bunny, it is its salvation." And then later, when Vincent Gallo got pissed at Ebert for trashing the movie at the Cannes Film Festival, Ebert responded to Gallo's calling him out, and he said, "I will one day be thin, but Vincent Gallo will always be the director of The Brown Bunny." Burn! Mic drop. Raj with the burn there. Ouch. Don't mess with the writers. Don't mess with the graduates of Champaign-Urbana, even though their team lost today.
There you go. All right. With that, we'll bring this podcast to a close. Thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure, again, you subscribe, rate, review. We'll be back at you soon with some more content. Until then, have fun watching movies, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Thank you.